Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan. I hope you're doing well today. I have a review finally for episode 6 of the Goosebumps 2023 TV remake, reboot, whatever you want to call this crap, from Hulu/Disney Plus, blah 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 blah. You've heard this for every review I've made, and this one is not going to be the most ruthless review ever for this show. This is called Night of the Living Dummy for the actual episode, of course, based on Slappy. Adapting Slappy once again. A lot of people were very curious about what was going to happen with him in this show, whether he'd be good or bad. And I'll get into my opinions about all that in a little bit, but this show has been bad. Really bad. Even the small improvement it made in episode 4, episode 5, was so bad that I forgot all about it. I had to sit down and read summaries just for my review video I recorded a moment ago. And then episode 6, which I'm talking about right now, premiered on October 20th of 2023, which was last Thursday at like 11 o'clock. I think it might have even been Friday's date, but it comes on at like 11 o'clock on Thursday, so I just watch it when I get home from work on Thursday night. Anyway, so, Night of the Living Dummy. Big fan. I've read and loved most Slappy books. I've talked about all of them here on my channel at this point. We just finished up the Slappy World book series. R.L. Stine started up the new series called House of Shivers. And Slappy World, despite it being hit or miss, gave people like myself who love Slappy the Dummy a lot of really cool new books to read, a lot of new stories that we didn't have. Maybe every few years you'd get a new Slappy book back in the day. Now we get them all the time, or at least we were until House of Shivers started. And I loved that. I love Slappy. I think he's fun. You can do so much with this little guy. And so many concepts that Stine, as such a talented writer, came up with were a blast. And I wanted to go into this episode trying to be more positive, as much as I despised everything except episode 4, which wasn't even that good. I even gave that a poor review, but better than the other 3 or 4 episodes I talked about surrounding it. I gotta tell you first and foremost, this is the best episode of the show so far. There's not much reason for that, aside from, well, some of the stuff involving Slappy. Some of the stuff that goes into the history of Harry Biddle. Because look, at the end of, the previous episode, episode 5, Mr. Brad, played by Justin Long, is still possessed by Harry Biddle, Harry Diddle, whatever you want to call the guy. And he invites the kids back inside with the suitcase they took, which probably has Slappy or parts of Slappy in it. He brings them back inside and starts to tell them about the story about their parents and how they all went to school together. And this kid named Harry Biddle, who died in the house that they're in right now. Justin Long's house. And eventually that leads into the history of Slappy the Dummy, who became Harry Biddle's best friend back in 1993 right before the time, leading up to the time, at the beginning of the first episode of this show when Harry Biddle was killed on screen in front of us in a house fire. And I gotta tell you, that stuff was not half bad. The Slappy stuff was not half bad for the most part. For the most part. Out of all the monsters in this show, I think the most respected one, at least sort of kind of when it was there, was the camera of the show. Everything else got disrespected. And that includes Slappy, in my opinion. Not tremendously, and I still kind of hate this episode, but I kind of like it more than the other ones. It's better than episode 4, the Go Eat Worms episode a lot of people like. It's definitely better than episode 1, 2, and 4, or 1, 2, and 3, and 5. Because you also had the Haunted Mask get crapped upon and ruined. You had the Cuckoo Clock of Doom was modified and ruined. You had, in the previous episode, Reader Beware, episode 5, we really didn't do anything there with any monsters, aside from a scrapbook that took Margot back in time to 1993, and that was it. It's not even really a monster in Goosebumps, And here we targeted Slappy, and I was kind of curious, what are they going to do to crap upon Slappy? They did a few things that I don't mind. They did a few other things that I do mind, that I think were just bad additions, whether it be aesthetically, which you probably know automatically what I'm talking about, or whether it be personality stuff, or just physically, design-wise with Slappy. Where do I even start? Again, the storytelling stuff, the writing in here for this episode with the background for Harry wasn't so bad. The Justin Long stuff, the kids' interaction with Justin as he tells them the story throughout the night or whatever time period he's telling them about Harry Biddle, that stuff wasn't so bad. His telling them about the history of Slappy was fairly interesting. It kind of hits upon some of the newer stuff like Slappy Beware from the Slappy World book series that came out like last year, I think. I believe that's when that book came out. I just reviewed it this year. It was good, but I think they had some tiebacks to that with Slappy's history. And I liked all that. I thought it was cool stuff. I like how some of the footage kind of looks like it's from like you know, like the 70s and like the 80s and all the way back to like the 30s or whatever it's supposed to be. That stuff wasn't half bad, in my personal opinion. I guess I'll go really into the Slappy stuff. I tried to think about where I want to go in here, but I guess I'll talk about the Slappy stuff. Slappy can call to you from another room, even if you haven't read the card in his jacket, the Karu Marie Odana Loma Malanu Carano. And by the way, every time they say Malanu Carano, they say Malona Carano, and I cringed every time. How did you guys not read the books? I swear to God the show is directed and written by AI. I swear to God about that. But anyway, they didn't read the card right, is what I'm saying. When you bring Slappy to life, even before you bring him to life, he can still communicate with you, as in speak to you through ghostly whispers, which isn't a horrible idea, but it's really like, what's the point of bringing him back to life and let him move around and stuff if you don't have to do that? Why not just bypass that, have him always be conscious, and have him always be evil, just doing his own thing, manipulating people? They didn't go that route, though. They kind of did stick with this abusive relationship approach, kind of like a Slappy gaslighting the people who he controls, and I don't understand why Slappy has to control just like teens and adults and stuff in this show, but in the books it was always kids. I assume it was kids in the book because it was a kids' book series, and that could have been more terrifying because your parents didn't believe you, no one would believe you, the police aren't going to believe you. As a teen in this show, with the things that are happening in this town at this time around Halloween night, I feel like people would have to believe you. The police would have to investigate things that Slappy does, and blah, blah, blah. Now, let's talk about Slappy a little bit more. The gaslighting persona of him talking with people is pretty interesting. I actually think the writing based around that, of how he messes with Harry mentally, is kind of cool. Before that, we follow an old comedic magician guy. I think his name was Ephraim. I want to say Ephraim, something like that. I think it was Ephraim is how you pronounce it. Slappy has a lot of business that he does with this guy and makes him super famous. Like super, super famous. On like Broadway stardom and New York City type stuff. And how no one recognizes that Slappy is this famous comedic prop is amazing to me. Because that would be the history if everybody knew that the original ventriloquist using Slappy, or at least working with him behind the scenes, was so popular. It wouldn't just be like a knockoff doll. This doll clearly has a look that has been through a lot of junk. You know what I mean? It's been through a lot of time, it's been around for a while. That stuff is cool. I noticed the show doesn't go too much yet into the history of Slappy, who made him, whether it be a sorcerer or this or that. They hint to the sorcerer thing, though, because Slappy also teaches, like the original ventriloquist who's working with him in the flashback sequence of most of this season, or most of this episode, is he basically teaches other people magic, how to do tricks and stuff. The con to this, though, the thing that I absolutely despise, is the fact that Slappy can't walk around. They don't just outright say it. They don't outright say it. But Slappy can't walk around. He can, like, sit up, he can move his head around, he can look at people, he can talk, he can move his eyebrows, his eyes, all of that stuff. But he can't get up and run. Let me tell you a little story about yours truly here. When I got into Goosebumps and I watched either Haunted Mask 2, or Night of the Living Dummy 3 on VHS tape from a Hollywood video I rented all the time from, when I got into it, and then I got into the books after a skating rink birthday party when I was a kid, and I got Dummy 1, 2, and 3, I believe, in a kind of, what was it, a re-release type of thing, whatever it's called. They had the newer covers that they had released, not new cartoonish covers, but the original Tim Jacobus covers kind of repositioned on the covers with the new framing and everything. When those came out, I had a moment where I read the original Dummy book, and it was before my parents got a divorce. So I had memories of going to my grandparents' house where I used to take the ventriloquist dummies that Goosebumps got me into wanting. And yeah, I had a couple of them, I still do. Danny O'Day was the first one I ever bought, or ever received as a gift for a Christmas present. And then Charlie McCarthy. And I think Howdy Doody after that. But anyway, yeah, I had some dummies back in the day. I still have 2 of them, but most of them I got rid of. I got into ventriloquism heavily. I'm not good at it, I never was, but I loved it. I loved the dummies themselves. They were like best friends. It was just fun. And I remember specifically having this one vision in my head as I read the original OG Night of the Living Dummy book. I think it was in the first 10 books ever released from Goosebumps, if I'm remembering correctly, or at least the first 15 is when it was released. The cover terrified me. So did Dummy 2's cover, so did Dummy 3's cover, but I couldn't stop looking at them. matter of fact. And I remember always thinking of the image of that first Tim Jacobus dummy book, of Slappy with the glowing green eyes and the red lips and the way the mouth is designed and it's attached to the neck when it would move open and closed and all of that. I had this image in my head of opening up my closet like one of the characters in the book when she's sleeping, and she hears the door open, and she sees somebody creaking across her room, very creepily in the dark, to go out into the hallway. My grandparents' house, once upon a time, a long time ago, on my dad's side, their house reminded me so much of what I thought the Dummy 1 book house would be like. So I always had this image in my head of sleeping over there on some weekends when I'd go to visit my cousins there, and my grandparents too, during the summertime. I had it in my head, this image of that dummy coming out of the same closets, walking up the hallway, and having the same kind of recreational adventures that Chris and Amy had in the original book. And I kept thinking about that all the time, and to this day, when I see my Slappy dummy that I'll probably have in the thumbnail of this video because he's across the room over there, hi buddy, when I do that, when I think about that dummy, or if I even see him, I think about the Dummy 1 book, and I think about how much that cover scared me, and the images in that book, or the imagery in that book, frightened me so much. And I expected that to carry on over here. I say all that to say this: Slappy can't even walk around. He can't even move around on his own legs. He can just sit and kind of, if he wants to like bob around or something, he could do that. But he can't walk. And it's so weird to me that that's the case. Maybe there's something else they'll do later on in the season. I kind of hope they do. There is an episode called Night of the Living Dummy Part 2 that I expect them to do something more with Slappy at some point from this point on in the series. Which would be cool, because at this point, he's about the only thing I liked aside from Lucas as a character. I guess what we could go into is the look of Slappy. So Slappy has like the real hair. He doesn't have like the kind of molded to the actual dummy head hair like he had in the original show. He doesn't have like the hardwood hair like he does in the movies. He has like actual hair, like doll hair. You know how like dolls have like the actual, it feels like real hair type stuff? It's probably like horsetail hair or something. That's what Slappy has on his head, and I hate it. I think the haircut's awful. It's like if you put my haircut on top of his head, it's horrible. It looks terrible. But then on top of that, to add insult to injury, they make Slappy very cartoonish looking. Like his face is very, if you've seen the covers that all of us, especially myself, were swearing to God that it was AI art for these posters from Disney. A lot of people were reporting that they were the real poster. I swore that they looked fake. If you go to the Goosebumps IMDb page for this particular show, you'll see that same poster with the purple and everything. I was begging God not to let Slappy look like that, and he looks exactly like that, but a little aged, with some cracks and stuff, some cobwebs, that kind of thing. He is no Billy the Dummy from Dead Silence. I don't really think this Slappy is scary, but I don't know if I like the design. I usually love ventriloquist dummies. One of my favorite ones I've ever seen in anything is from an Anthony Hopkins movie from like the 70s, I believe, or the 80s. It might have been the 80s, but it was called Magic. You probably know about that movie. It's terrifying. If you haven't seen Magic, you're absolutely missing out. One of the scariest dummy movies ever made, hands down, no questions asked. It's also a book that I've not read that I have somewhere here on my table that I can't see to just show it to you. But anyway, Slappy looks more like the Magic dummy. What is his name? Corky, I think? It's been a long time. Slappy looks like that guy, but also with a very cartoonish face. I also know when you see his hands sometimes dangling by his sides, they look like they should have Mickey Mouse gloves on them because they're so poofy and puffy and white and bigger than his actual body. He's about the same size as the Slappy from the Bride of the Living Dummy episode, if you've seen that, from back in the Extreme Goosebumps episodes era. Which is cool. I like that we have a dummy that big and not one as big as like the teens or whatever, kind of like the Dummy 3 episode sometimes had. That's kind of cool. I kind of dig it. Now, they put a hat on Slappy. Not always, but enough to bother me. In my opinion, aesthetically, I don't like hats on ventriloquist dummies, even from the dummies I had in the past after I bought Howdy Doody, that just looked bad with hats. And if they had like the plaster hair and stuff, it wasn't so bad. But imagine me with like a not even a mobster hat. It looks like one of those old 1950s, 1940s cartoons like on Looney Tunes that someone would wear, like the ones that are complete circle on the top and that little part on the top of your head where your head actually goes, it's a complete circle in there too. That's what that hat looks like. I don't know what to compare it to. it looks like a double-decker Frisbee or something. You know, I hate that hat. It looks stupid on Slappy. It looks stupid on anybody who wears it, human or otherwise, so just don't put the hat on Slappy when he comes back in the series. Let's all agree to that, please. And then we move on to the final thing. I told Goosebumps Completionist and a lot of my other friends in the community on the Discord that personally, I don't want to call this Slappy, even though I've called this Slappy throughout the entire episode. I would much rather, because of his hijinks, because of how he is carried around everywhere, because he can't walk, I would rather call him Stewie. Because if you didn't know, if you haven't seen the episode yet, this might not bother anybody, it doesn't really bother me, it's just a weird, goofy choice, in my opinion. Slappy is British in this. And I don't have any problem with the voice actor. He has a very, very nice voice, by the way. No attack on the actor. He is actually putting in one of the best performances on this show for such a horribly written show. I feel bad for him because, again, the show has cursing in it. And one of the things that made me cringe so much is having Slappy curse. That was weird to an extent. He's supposed to be an evil dummy in a kid's show that's now been turned into a teenager CW piece of crap show from Riverdale knockoff land. Look, the Slappy cursing thing I can get over to an extent. It bothers me in one respect, one childish part of my brain, but on the other hand, it doesn't fit to me. It's weird. The British voice fits fine, but it's the weird dummy cursing thing that I think is more weird. I don't know. It's just a weird taste thing for me. It's a very subjective, very stupid complaint, I admit, but it's just me, you know? But then you have a scene in here where, mind you, Slappy is he's working with Harry in 1993, when Harry finds him and they become befriended and whatever. They have a scene where they do a show, like a talent show type of thing, or whatever it was at the school. Kind of project, I don't know, liberal arts class, whatever. And while they're up there, Slappy begins his cursing and whatever, and at one point to go overboard to insult the girls, like Margot's mom and whatever, that were friends with Harold, Slappy begins to talk about a couple of underage children in 1993's virginity. Yes, that was the most awkward, weird thing I've ever heard in my life. And the British Stewie voice from Family Guy made it even more bizarre. At that point, it had culminated in my brain, and it had finally come to the point where I said, you know what? I don't think they've necessarily ruined Slappy, but the not walking around thing is a deal breaker for me. The weird cursing thing is kind of a deal breaker, even though it's subjective and it's kind of dumb. I still don't like that. Now having Slappy talk about children's virginity is even weirder, and the jokes weren't even funny. They weren't even funny. At least Slappy in the old show or in the books, he's funny sometimes. Some of his jokes are cringe. Some of them are something you'd see out of a middle schooler's joke book that they created. But no. I don't like most of this. I think it sucks. I think they did my boy Slappy bad. Not as bad as like the Haunted Mask, who I also love. It's my second favorite monster in the franchise. But they've messed with him enough, just like they did with the Cuckoo Clock of Doom or the Haunted Mask. Man, I'm getting raspy. They messed with him enough that I don't like it. And I don't like what they have chosen to do with him. The weird hat, the weird cursing thing, the children's virginity jokes, which weren't even funny, so I hate to call them even jokes. Just the stuff was weird, man. Now, the other half of it where Slappy, again, is manipulating Harry and trying to tell him, like, hey, your mom and dad hate you. Hey, you think that Margot's mom likes you? Oh, she hates your guts. They're all going to make fun of you when you're not around. It reminded me a lot of Carrie. If you've seen Carrie and you know about the mom, and my mom and I have a joke about this to this day where we're always like, they're all going to laugh at you. That old thing, that gaslighting thing, I love that about the Slappy in this show. I think that's really, really good for the most part. But to be fair, in filmmaking, and in TV making, this episode is messy, dude. It jumps back and forth so much, and it mainly stays in flashback mode, which to me, from what I've always heard, it seems to be considered a sin amongst writers to have so much focus on a flashback. In my opinion, I kind of agree with that quite a bit of being a bad writer's tip. But at least Slappy was mildly entertaining. And it's kind of like the same thing I said with the worms on the action scene of episode 4. That was mildly entertaining enough to improve that episode a little bit. This right now, episode 6, I may be insulted by some things like not having Slappy walk, but I gotta tell you, I don't hate it. I kind of hate the episode overall, But like with the Harry Biddle stuff, I just don't care about this weird teen drama crap. It's so all over this show all the time for such poorly written characters from every angle of the show and every episode of the show that I just don't like the episode based on that. But when it comes to Slappy's history, I kind of like some of that stuff. Not all of it, obviously, not all of it, but I like a lot of it quite a bit, where I think it's at least watchable. It at least has some cool stuff in there. And I would say the same thing to you all right now that I said to my friends last Thursday when I watched the episode after work. I told them that I think if any of you have hated the season so far, and you're still trying to stick with the show to see if it gets better, even if it doesn't get better, I think many of you, if not most of you, will probably really like this episode. I myself don't really consider myself to like it all that much, but I do like quite a few more elements in this compared to episode 4, which I thought had some decent improvements to some degree. This was surprisingly solid in some ways, and in other ways, like changing Slappy so much, I hate it based on that. And again, I don't even want to call him Slappy. I want to call him Stewie, because he sounds like Stewie from Family Guy, just with a deeper, more bassier voice than what Seth MacFarlane had for Stewie. But I don't know. I don't understand the point of changing so much of this. I really don't. And then you got like the one part of the fan base who want Mr. Wood to be in the show so much, and I understand why, but I don't want them to ruin another character. I don't want them to ruin another person that I really enjoy. People are stretching so far now to try to say that like this show is referencing this or that and being so smart about Goosebumps lore. People are saying because one chick in here is named Amy, that, oh, that must be a reference to the original Dummy episode. Dude, do you know how many people on this planet are named Amy? How many writers out there, or how many Goosebumps books have a character named Amy written in them? I'd guarantee you a lot. A lot. From what I've read, which is mostly pretty much everything at this point, I've seen the word Amy quite a bit in some of these books. I believe, at least 2 or 3. Maybe even 4 or 5. But Stein reuses names all the time. There's a bunch of Johns. Pretty sure there's a couple of Bobs or Bobbies in there. Roberts, which is a variation of Bob. Bob is the nickname of Robert. You know what I mean. Stop stretching so hard to justify your love for the show. If you enjoy it, that's fine. And again, I think most people will like this episode way more than I did. I really do. You look at the ratings for this compared to what I've seen of other ones on IMDb and whatever. It seems like the fans who genuinely liked or disliked this show seem to agree that they like this episode quite a bit, which is cool. I'm glad for you guys, but for me, again, I feel like I'm James Rolfing here. You know, James Rolfe always said, like, Jack Nicholson was the best Joker of all time, better than Heath Ledger. It always seemed like it was the classic original thing that he loved more than anything else when it came to movies and all that. Or major villains or superheroes, whatever. I'm sure he would say, like, Tobey Maguire's better than Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland, which is not true. Andrew Garfield is the OG, in my personal opinion. But it's a shame to see this show now take even Slappy's walking abilities away from him. Where now he can't walk, he can't stalk, just like the original book cover said, and I think advertisements for this show had Slappy listed as walking and stalking. What are you going to do? What threat is Slappy at this point, aside from whispering sweet nothings to other people? You know what I mean? Like, it's just irritating. It's irritating in a lot of ways, but to have such a half and half good and bad for Slappy in this adaptation on this show, it's hard to really get my points across without feeling like a hypocrite, because I do like half of it. I think half of it's genuinely good, but the other half sucks. It just does. It's bad choice after bad choice with the series, but I will give them their credit. AI written, AI directed, or whatever, at least Slappy had some kind of entertainment value to him, no matter who you were. You know, the weird virgin jokes thing, that was really weird. I don't think that belonged in here at all, especially coming from Slappy's mouth. But, whatever. Who cares what I have to say? With all that being said, though, it's a mishmash. It has some mildly okay CGI in here. The cinematography is okay. I actually think the locations and stuff they shot were cool. I think the use of footage from other movies and stuff, I believe it was other movies, but it may just be like stock footage and whatever that were used here from, like, let's say New York in the 80s or whatever. That stuff looked pretty good. Not half bad at all. At one point, I could have sworn they were going to bring out Jimmy O. James, and they absolutely did not. They picked a guy that looked just like Jimmy O. James from Bride of the Living Dummies episode. They absolutely did. It was cool to see that guy there. I wish they'd done more with him, but they did not. The music in the episode was kind of bland and bad, like usual with the series. But that's really all I have to say at the end of the day. This was not awful, and the fact that they removed all of the teenagers except for the 1993 group made it a lot better, in my personal opinion. I feel like this show at some point is going to start focusing later on in the next couple of episodes more on the parents. It's focused too much on the parents already, but I feel like it's really going to round it back and have the parents and the teens of modern day go to take down Slappy somewhere, and I just don't care. This show is going to be running until the end of November, and I just kind of want it to be over with. I just don't want to have anything to do with it. I want it to be done because it sucks. And now I feel like I'm the only person on the planet who has issues with the Slappy episode, you know? It seems like a lot of people really like this, which is cool. Again, good for you. I enjoy some of this episode too. And again, I'll say it again. I think this is the best episode of the season at this point, and if this ended up being the best of the whole season, I would not be surprised at the kind of quality we've gotten on writing, acting, everything. Which is a shame. Props again to the voice actor of Slappy. Really good voice, man. A really good choice, despite my weird pick with the British thing. But a really good pick for a voice to make him kind of spooky. There is an atmosphere that comes with Slappy on the show that has been completely non-existent in this entire series so far. And this guy really brought it to life because of the voice they gave him. I gotta give him that. I think Slappy looks goofy with the cartoonish look to him, but that voice actor, he's good, man. I gotta give him that. Anyway, with all that being said, that's my review for Episode 6 of the Goosebumps 2023 show. If you have some thoughts and comments, I'd love to hear all of your comments down in the comment section down below. And if I had to rate this episode on a 5-star basis, I think I'd give it like a... It was justifiably entertaining. I would say there's not really... It's a slower episode, but it's a good slow. You know, it's a good slow burn of an episode that gives you the history of Slappy. I've thought about this over. I've thought about it more, you know, and I think I'm willing to give it about a 3 out of 5 stars. Yes, I wish they'd read the card right. Molyneux Carano. That's how you pronounce it. Molyneux Carano. But no, not Malona Carano. That's not what it says. Okay? Learn to read. I swear to God, that's another great example of the AI thing. I swear to God. Anyway, I'd give it a 3 out of 5 stars. If I'm being honest with you, it's a very low 3 out of 5, but it's a 3 out of 5. I thought this was a pretty decent episode for the most part. I hate what it's going to do for Slappy. Because now, every time you talk to somebody in the community now about this show, they're like, well, the 90s show wasn't that good, or the Goosebumps books weren't that good to begin with. They're so childish. Why would you want that? Because it's Goosebumps, you scumbag. Stop trying to pretend like Goosebumps wasn't always like that. That's what made it fun. That pulpy horror nature to it is what made it fun. This episode basically being a knockoff of Magic, combined with a little bit of Nightmare on Elm Street, made it pretty solid. Overall, if I'm being honest with you, despite my criticisms throughout this episode and this review. So, with all that being said, what did you think about the episode? I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments once again down below. Sorry for all the rambling, I just had a lot to say because I'm a big Slappy obsessor, Stan as my friends call me. And with that being said, I'd love to hear everything you have to say. Thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all. Is this your favorite adaptation of Slappy ever, compared to the movies, the TV show from back in the 90s? What do you think? I'd love to hear all that down below, too. Anyway, thank you guys. God bless you again. Tune in this week. I'm going to try to get a review for the newest episode on Friday. So hopefully you'll tune in for that. Might be a couple of days late, but we'll see what happens. And again, like I said in my previous review, put your comments, your questions for me in the Q&A announcement video a few videos back here on the channel, because I will announce that, or I will perform that, whatever you want to call it. I will read the questions and respond to them on Halloween this year of 2023. So hopefully you tune in for that too, in case you're curious. If you have any questions at all, put them on that video, not this one. Anyway, just wanted to reinstate that in case anybody cared, in case you wanted to be a part of this. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, guys. God bless you all, and goodbye. Happy Halloween.